Okay, today we'll start a little differently. A moment, if you will. Forgive me for going a little weird here, but there's a purpose. So, I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed." And on the pedestal these words appear: "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." So, that's a poem. It's one of my favorites. You may have figured out that that's a poem because you're all smart and you can use the computer and stuff. But that's a poem that I happen to like a lot. And this is sort of tying into what tonight's ramble is about. Because I was thinking about it at work, and one of my favorite things to see happen at a game is incorporating real-world art. Specifically, real-world poetry in this case. There is a lot of real-world poetry out there that is inspirational to gaming. If you cannot listen to Ozymandias and come up with a cool idea for an adventure for D&D, you're not trying hard enough. Poetry speaks to our passions. Our games can tie into our passions. You can incorporate art into your games. And I don't mean, can games be art? I happen to be in the school of thought that says games can be art. But I mean, drawing inspiration and involving poetry or classical drawings and art and acting, plays, stories that are famous and iconic. I'm not talking like I'm drawing from the latest R.A. Salvatore novel. I'm talking Beowulf and the Odyssey, the Iliad, the King Arthur, the stories that bind us as a people, and not just ours. Some of the classic stories of ancient Japanese, Chinese myth. The Anasazi stories, of the spider storyteller, the various legends and myths of our collective consciousness can be part of our storytelling experience, and that's what games are about. They're about telling really cool stories where the PCs go off and save the world, or the PCs don't save the world, and it's the tragic tale of their failure, or something. But there's a story involved. And when you have a story, calling on those cultural touchstones is important. And poetry has been part of the human experience pretty much since we could write. Poetry and song have gone hand in hand. You can't exactly expect everybody to be able to sing. I can't sing. I can't carry a note in a bucket. But I can read a good poem. Am I a good poet? No, not really. To be fair, I haven't had a lot of classical training in the subject, and it's not where I spend most of my time writing. But I like a poetic turn, even in my writing. I like to think of things in poetic terms. And I like to incorporate poems in games. Dust to Dust, the LARP that I've helped with quite often, one of the basic Races, at its heart, has a Tennyson poem involved in it. We are not now that which we once were. Really ties back to the Returned, who are a bunch of heroes that came back from the dead. These poems are sort of great ways to invest the emotional resonance to what is a classical story. Ozymandias, okay, in a D&D terms, you incorporate that into finding maybe the ruins of a lost civilization. But the theme you draw from it, the inspiration you draw from it, is sort of hammering home these were great and powerful people, and their lives are left in ruin, almost but forgotten by history. And there's something to be learned there. You can do that in a game. You can also write poetry. Listen, even if you're bad at writing poetry is a healthy activity anyway. I didn't say I was good at writing poetry, but I still write it. And you know what? Use that poetry in the games. It's fun. Write stories for your games and put them into play for people to read. Admittedly, that can be a lot of work. You gotta face up to the fact that it can be a lot of work, but it can be worth it. But if you are running out of inspiration for your games, go back to some classic poetry, some Shakespeare, some classic stories. Don't just look to the modern storytellers. And yes, J.R.R. Tolkien is a modern storyteller, kids. I realize that it's tempting to think of him as, bedrock foundation of the culture, but he's not. He's awesome. I love, the stuff, but Arthur is written into, the Anglo-Saxon history. It's part of having any tie to the English kingdoms. Charlemagne, Beowulf, Odysseus, Achilles. These are figures in Western culture that everybody at some point learns a little bit about. And if you want to convey the feel of another culture, learn about the stories from that culture. Those stories are the touchstones of that culture. Those stories are the parts that make it real, that make it breathe. If you want your cultures in a game to feel real, tell their stories. Because they've got them. I don't know. I may be off base on this, but I think most games would benefit, most role-playing games anyway, would benefit from the incorporation of art. Not just, hand-drawn things or paintings, but artful words, poems, plays. If you want to play a game set in, say, a Chinese-inspired culture, read a bunch of Chinese stories about the origin of the nations there and the lands, and try and incorporate that feel, those touchstones, into your game, because it helps people sort of understand the world better. We understand Western European games, we being people of somewhat Anglo-Saxon or at least Western European descent, understand Western European inspired role-playing settings so well, and we identify with them so well because they can connect to stories we already know. If you want to connect to stories of cultures that you are maybe not as familiar with, if you want to connect to a culture of, an African culture or South American culture or Native American or Native North American or even Aboriginal culture. Learn their stories and then write your setting and your game to match those. I don't know. It struck me that this would be a fun thing to talk about. And I know that I will have many of my friends who will have opinions on this. And feel free to comment, because I love my friends, and my friends are deeply literate people who probably can quote more poems than I can. And probably understand them better than I do. Anyways, I thought I would make that my ramble tonight. Bring art into your game. Bring real cultures, the stories, the pieces of iconography from the touchstones of what real cultures are into your game, and it will make your game feel more real. Anyway, that's my thoughts. Like I said, started out a little weird tonight. If you can think of a good poem for me to use in a game, let me know. I have a list in my head, but I'd love to hear what other people think. What words inspire your games? What pieces of art inspire your games? What is actually inspiring you when you're running your games, when you're playing your games? Oh well. That's my brief ramble tonight. Subscribe, like, share with all your friends, read poems. I challenge anyone to find a poem that they like and read it on YouTube. Just because. Why not? What could it hurt? I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.